Welcome once again, folks, to the Hour of the Time. I'm your host, William Cooper. We'll start off tonight's show with the Socialist National Anthem. Oh, I love it. The Socialist National Anthem, born under a bad sign. Folks, tonight's episode of Mystery Babylon, the 18th hour, I'm going to take directly, verbatim, from Chapter 9 of A. Ralph Epperson's book called The New World Order. He's going to be a guest on this show soon, and you'll know why once you hear what we've got to say tonight. So pay attention. And remember, as always, just because I'm giving you this series on Mystery Babylon doesn't mean that you're supposed to believe what I'm telling you blindly. That's why I gave you the bibliography last night. You've got to go out and find the truth from your own research. And I'm the only one that ever tells you that. Everybody else wants you to believe verbatim what they say because they're saying it and they're who they are. And I'm telling you not to believe anybody, not even me, not even your own mother, unless you can verify it in your own work, your own research. Make sure that you do it too. Now the Bible, folks, discusses a being called Lucifer in both the Old and New Testaments, and we're going to be talking a lot about the Bible tonight because we have to look at this from every point of view. We've looked at it from the mystery schools. We've looked at it logically. We've looked at it historically. Now we're going to look at it from the Bible's point of view, but not strictly from the Bible's point of view. But you need to know this. The Bible discusses a being called Lucifer in both the Old and the New Testaments. Other names for this creature are Satan and the devil. One of the first explanations of just who this being known as Lucifer is found in the Old Testament in a book written by the prophet Isaiah, who wrote around 740 BC. He wrote that Lucifer was created full of wisdom and was perfect. He was created the anointed cherub that covereth the throne of God, and that he actually was upon the holy mountain of God. He later corrupted his wisdom by reason of his brightness. The Bible then records that God cast him to the ground. Isaiah wrote this in Isaiah chapter 14, verse 12. Quote, "How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which didst weaken the nations?" Unquote. And folks, this was the very first recorded UFO sighting, if indeed it was a sighting at all. Quote, "For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit also upon the mound of the congregation in the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High." Unquote. Luke, a writer in the New Testament, records in Luke chapter 10, verse 18, that Jesus said that he beheld, quote, "Satan as lightning fall from heaven," unquote. Peter records in 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 4, that God has, quote, "spared not the angels that sinned, but cast them down," unquote, as well. Paul, another New Testament writer, wrote this about Lucifer in 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 14, in about 57 AD. Quote, "And no marvel, for Satan is transformed into an angel of light," unquote. And in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 9, Paul wrote that Satan was capable of working, quote, "lying wonders," unquote. In around 90 AD, John, the author of the book known as Revelation, wrote in Revelation chapter 12, verse 9, that Satan was a, quote, "dragon," unquote. Lucifer shows up in the original site of human habitation on earth called the Garden of Eden. The Creator, God, placed Adam, the first man, and later Eve, the first woman, in this garden, but told them that there were certain rules that they had to abide by. And these are spelled out in Genesis chapter 2, verses 16 and 17. Quote, "And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, Of every tree of the garden thou mayest freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil thou shalt not eat of it, for in the day that thou eatest thereof, thou shalt surely die," unquote. Later, Lucifer spoke through a serpent to Eve, but in reality to both men and women. Quote, "Yea, hath God said, Ye shall not eat of every tree of the garden? And the woman said unto the serpent, We may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, God hath said, Ye shall not eat of it, lest ye die. And the serpent said unto the woman, Ye shall not surely die, for God doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. Unquote. So from the above information, it is possible to glean a little knowledge about the nature of Lucifer. 1, he was cast down from heaven because he desired to ascend directly into the seat of heavenly power, the throne of God. 2, he is referred to as the son of the morning. This appears to be a reference to Lucifer being similar to the sun, which also rises every morning. His desire, number 3, his desire is to sit on the north side of the mountain of God. Lucifer can deceive the world. This is number 4. Lucifer can deceive the world because he has been transformed into an angel of light. And 5, Lucifer can work lying wonders. Now, with those basic understandings, folks, of Lucifer in place, it will be possible to examine the views of others about this fallen entity. However, not all agree with a picture of Lucifer being evil. For Albert Pike wrote this, quote, There is no rebellious demon of evil, our principle of darkness, and in eternal controversy with God. Unquote. In fact, Mr. Pike believes that Lucifer was not a force of evil, but could be a force for good, and he wrote this in Morals and Dogma, which I forgot to give you yesterday in the bibliography. He wrote this in Morals and Dogma, quote, For the initiates, those initiated into the true secrets of Masonry, this is not a person but a force, created for good, but which may serve for evil. Unquote. To further amplify that belief of Mr. Pike's, it becomes important to quote a letter that he wrote on July the 14th, 1889, to the 23 Supreme Councils of the world. Judging from the contents of this letter, it appears that Mr. Pike was attempting to tell the leaders of the various Supreme Councils all over the world that they were to know that Lucifer was the secret god of the Masons. This letter clearly indicates that he believed the position that Lucifer was a god who had come to earth for the good of mankind, and he wrote this, quote, That which we must say to the crowd is... Presumably, Mr. Pike meant that the crowd was all of the non-Masons or the public at large. That which we must say to the crowd is we worship a God, but it is the God that one adores without superstition, unquote. So it appears that one of the purposes of this letter was to advise all of the top-ranking Masons that they were to concoct a story that the Masons worshipped the traditional God so that none could ever accuse them of worshiping a cherub, a nun god, by the name of Lucifer. In other words, they were to deny that Lucifer was their god whenever an outsider was smart enough to break through all of the secrets and figure it out. Well, of course, folks, they're sworn to secrecy. They have to deny anything about the true secrets of their order. I mean, what kind of logic is this? That's plain as the nose on your face. You must understand that when you ask a Mason a question about Freemasonry, he's going to tell you a lie because he is sworn to secrecy, and he is sworn by blood oaths. And I know that by the time they've reached the 32nd degree, they've taken at least 32 different oaths swearing them to secrecy. Minimum. So, you should know this already. Now, let's continue, but I'm going to go back and read that part over. It appears that one of the purposes of this letter was to advise all of the top-ranking Masons that they were to concoct a story that the Masons worshipped the traditional God so that none could ever accuse them of worshiping a cherub, a nun god by the name of Lucifer. It's very important. In other words, they were to deny that Lucifer was their god whenever an outsider was smart enough to break through all of the secrets and figure it out, as I and many others have done, as a Ralph Epperson has done. So the secret inside the Masonic order is that Lucifer is their secret god. Any non-Mason today who attempts to explain to any of their Masonic friends or relatives that this is the secret inside the lodge will be met with an instantaneous denial. Every Mason, whether they know the secret of the lodge or not, will obviously deny the accusation because they must. Mr. Pike continued, Quote, "You may repeat it to the 32nd, 31st, and 30th degrees. The Masonic religion should be by all of us initiates of the high degrees maintained in the purity of the Luciferian doctrine," unquote. You see, Albert Pike at that time was at the head of all the lodges of Freemasonry of the world, and at the head of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry in the United States of America. Here Mr. Pike seems to indicate that it is the 30th, 31st, and 32nd degrees that are to be taught the Luciferian doctrine. The direct evidence that the honorary 33rd degree is formally taught that Lucifer is the great architect of the universe will be presented later. But here Pike seems to say that that lesson is to be taught at an earlier degree. Quote, "If Lucifer were not God, would Adonai, the God of the Christians and the Jews, and his priest calumniate," which is defined as spreading false and harmful statements about or to slander, would they calumniate him? Pike makes two incredible statements about Lucifer. One, he is considered to be a god, and two, the priests and the rabbis have it all backwards and are all slandering his name. As has been illustrated, the Bible states that Lucifer is nothing more than a fallen cherub. He's not a god. Yet Mr. Pike clearly states that Lucifer is a god. Now how can that be? And secondly, those who claim that he is the wicked one are slandering him. Those individuals have it all wrong. And Mr. Pike continued, quote, "The true and pure philosophic religion is the belief in Lucifer, the equal of Adonai," unquote. Adonai also spelled, well, in the first place here it's spelled A-D-O-N-A-Y, and he says Adonai, also spelled A-D-O-N-A-I, is the Hebrew word for God. To show that Pike was referring to the God of the Bible, he wrote this in his book entitled Morals and Dogma, quote, "Adonai, the rival of Baal and Osiris," unquote. In other words, Adonai is Typhon. That's an aside from me, folks. That's not written in this book. But as you've been listening to this series that I've given you, you know that Adonai, if this is true, if he is the rival of Baal and Osiris, then he is Typhon. As has been illustrated, Osiris is the sun god, and the sun has been shown to be a symbol of Lucifer. Adonai is the rival of Lucifer, both in the Bible and in the writings of Albert Pike. Quote, "But Lucifer, God of light and God of good, is struggling for humanity against Adonai, the God of darkness and evil," unquote. And here once again Mr. Pike writes that Lucifer and Adonai are rivals, and that the religious world has it all backwards. Lucifer is the good God, and Adonai is the God of evil and darkness. The author would like to interrupt the narrative to make an observation, and this observation is being made by a Ralph Epperson, not me. He wrote this book. That authenticity of that letter by Albert Pike that was just quoted has been questioned by a variety of writers. It has been reported that Mr. Pike made these comments in an encyclical hand-carried to the meeting of 23 Supreme Councils of the World on July 14, 1889 in Paris, France. This author, meaning A. Ralph Epperson, is willing to concede that the only evidence for the contents of this encyclical consists of it being quoted in a book written by a Frenchman named A.C. de la Rive, entitled La Femme et l'Enfant dans la Ranque Méconnerie Universelle. That title translated from French to English means The Woman and Child in Universal French Masonry. A copy of that page that contains that quote and the cover of the book has been supplied to this author, meaning A. Ralph Epperson, by a concerned researcher who had someone locate the book in France for him and make copies of the pertinent pages. The author has read another book that contains the English translation of that encyclical. That book is entitled Occult Theocracy and was written in 1933 by Edith Starr Miller. She cites the book by Mr. de la Rive as her source. She obviously believed that the letter was true and contained the actual thoughts of Mr. Albert Pike. He said it in so many other places, including in his own book, Morals and Dogma, that I also believe that the letter is true, and now I'm speaking as myself, William Cooper. In other words, Going back to A. Ralph Epperson's words, in other words, the only source for the letter is a Frenchman who quotes it in his book and not Mr. Albert Pike himself. It must be assumed that Mr. Pike, if he were alive today and was asked whether the letter was his, would deny that he ever wrote such an encyclical, whether or not he had written it, because he must. He is sworn to maintain the secrets. But the reader is admonished to remember that if he did indeed worship Lucifer and wrote the encyclical, he would certainly have to deny it, so that answer would tell the researcher nothing. It is the contention of this writer, A. Ralph Epperson, and others who are attempting to decipher the secret symbols of the Masonic order, that a small percentage of the Masons know that all of the symbols inside the lodge refer to Lucifer. And I am one of those who believe this, folks. My research has shown it to be absolutely true, and I could prove it. And I've already given you direct quotes from many Freemasons that already prove it. And it must be remembered that these Masons must, of necessity, do all that they can to deny any revelation of any of the secrets of the lodge. So it is not essential to this writer's, A. Ralph Epperson's, position that this encyclical be proven to be valid. It is the author's contention that there is ample evidence from other sources, including from Masons other than Mr. Pike, that the secret god inside the Masonic lodges is Lucifer, and I wholeheartedly concur with Mr. Epperson. That evidence is available to anyone who cares to locate it. But there is another Mason who knows that Lucifer is the good god of a particular segment of the Masons. Pike's fellow 33rd degree Mason, Manly P. Hall, also felt that this god was a god of good. He wrote in his book entitled The Secret Teachings of All Ages, quote, "Sun worship played an important part in nearly all the early pagan mysteries. The solar deity was slain by wicked ruffians who personified the evil principle of the universe. By means of certain rituals and ceremonies, symbolic of purification and regeneration, this wonderful God of good was brought back to life and became the savior of his people," unquote. This God who came back to life is not the Jesus of the Bible, because Mr. Hall refers to him as the solar deity. He is referring to the death and resurrection of Osiris, covered in detail in the Masonic rituals, and I've already relayed to you who Osiris really is. In fact, in this series on the mystery religion, I've proven it time and time again. But Manly P. Hall has further identified Lucifer as the god of some of his fellow Masons. He has written this in his book entitled The Lost Keys of Freemasonry. It's one of the books that I gave you last night, folks. When the Mason, quote, "When the Mason learns the key to the warrior on the block is the proper application of the dynamo of the living power, he has learned the mystery of his craft. The seething energies of Lucifer are in his hands, and before he may step onward and upward, he must prove his ability to properly apply energy," unquote. Mikhail Bakunin, the Russian anarchist, also addressed this question of evil and good gods, and he wrote, quote, "The evil one is the satanic revolt against divine authority, revolt in which we see the fecund, defined as being fertile, germ of all human emancipations, the revolution. Socialists recognize each other by the words, 'In the name of the one to whom the great wrong has been done.' Satan, folks, is the eternal rebel, the first freethinker, and the emancipator of worlds. He makes men ashamed of his bestial ignorance and obedience. He emancipates him, stamps upon his brow the seal of liberty and humanity, in urging him to disobey and eat of the fruit of knowledge," unquote. You see, I've been telling you all along that socialists and the mystery religion of Babylon are the same, and now, in his book, A. Ralph Epperson has proven it. That thought, that Lucifer was a good spirit to whom a great wrong was done, is the basic thought that holds the New Age together, according to Tex Mars, the author of 2 major books on the subject. And he has written, quote, "Many New Agers commend Lucifer because by tempting Eve he enabled man to evolve toward enlightened knowledge and godhood," unquote. Remember I told you that with the gift of intellect, man will develop technology that will make him God? They are working feverishly in laboratories now to uncover the secret of immortal life. Mr. Mars discusses the thoughts of a leader in a mystical organization called the Stell Group. How many times have I mentioned that? The Stell Group. Named Eklal Koshana. He writes that this New Age leader says that, quote, Lucifer is the head of a secret brotherhood of spirits. The brotherhood is named after Lucifer because the great angel Lucifer has been responsible for the abolishment of Eden in order that men could begin on the road to spiritual advancement, unquote. Lars Hansen was reared in the Stell Group. Lars Hansen was reared in the Stell Group. Tom Valentine was a member of the Stell Group. Tom Valentine wrote a book called The Life and Death of Planet Earth. Get it and read it, folks. Tom Valentine was associated with the Communist Party. Now he's a member of the Liberty Lobby, which came right out of the old German Nazi Bund. They used to sing the Horst Wessel song at the beginning of their meetings. Wake up! Wake up! Wake up. Why do you think every time somebody calls Tom Valentine and asks him about Freemasonry and their complicity in the conspiracy, he covers it up and hangs up on the person as quickly as possible and denies that there's any complicity of Freemasonry? Tom Valentine has been attacking me for years because he knows that I know who he is and what he's about, that I know the origins of the Liberty Lobby, that I know their message is that our government is no good, it doesn't work, that it's turned against us, and it's all lies. For it's the people who are in these secret societies who have turned against us, who are delivering that message to us to get us to voluntarily overthrow or get rid of our own government, the only government in the history of the world that has ever set man free. And I'm the only one who lets you know this. It's not our government, it's not the Constitution, it's not the Bill of Rights, it's not the structure. It's the secret societies. It's the Tom Valentines. It's the Bo Greitzes. It's all of these people who belong to Freemasonry, and the Ancient Order of the Rose and Cross, and the Knights Templar, and the Sovereign and Military Order of the Knights of Malta, and the Order of St. John of Jerusalem, and many more. Many more. Socialist, international socialism, under many, many different names. You see, folks, you see, the senator was right. Senator McCarthy was absolutely right. He was correct. He just didn't know the proper name. He thought he was ferreting out communism. He wasn't. You see, if he understood what I understand, then he would have survived the attacks of the very people that he was trying to ferret out, who owned the media that turned against him and destroyed him. Hollywood, who turned against him and destroyed him through manipulating the opinion of the public. See, communism, folks, is just a word. It's another boogaboo enemy. The real enemy, folks, is Mystery Babylon.